Good afternoon. Thank you so much for being here. I am pleased on behalf of the University of Chicago, alongside our partners in this event from the MacArthur Foundation, the United States Department of Housing and Urban Development, UN Habitat, Chicago Council on Global Affairs, and Chicago Sister Cities, to welcome you to this great event. And I'm also pleased on behalf of the university to welcome you to the Gleacher Center for what is, I hope, an important kickoff event to the World Urban Forum number 7. It's great to see many familiar faces in the audience from Washington, D.C., from around Chicago, and from other parts of the world. Let me make a special acknowledgement today of Francesca De Ferrari, the Human Settlement Officer for UN Habitat. Francesca is here on behalf of the Executive Director of UN Habitat, who is unable to join us today, but Francesca would like to say a few words about the importance of the World Urban Forum. Thank you, Francesca.
Good afternoon, everybody. I would like to introduce you, explain you a little bit what is the World Urban Forum. The World Urban Forum was established by the United Nations to examine one of the most pressing issues facing the world today, the rapid urbanization, and its impact on communities, cities, economies, and policies. It is projected that in next 50 years, 2/3 of the population will be living in towns and cities. The major challenge is to minimize the growth of poverty in cities and towns. The World Urban Forum is a biannual gathering that is attended by a wide range of partners, from non-governmental organizations, community-based organizations, urban professionals, academics, governments, local authorities, and national and international association of local governments. It gives all these actors a common platform to discuss urban issues in formal and informal ways and come up with action-oriented proposals to create sustainable cities. The number of people attending World Urban Forum increases every couple of years. We started in 2002 that only 1,200 people were participating, and the last World Urban Forum that we held in Naples 2 years ago, we already reached 10,000 people, and hopefully this year we will be even more. The characteristic of the forum and why it's becoming so successful is because of the differs by the usual UN governing bodies. It's not a legislative forum and doesn't follow the usual rule of the United Nations. It's an open forum where everybody can participate and give their contribution. The 7th session of the World Urban Forum this year, it will be hosted in Colombia from 5th of April to 11th of April. And the title will be Urban Equity in Development. Now, the reason why it has this title is because we can see all over the world the inequity is growing. And we have to find ways to measure the inequities, especially in the cities, and to address it. It's the reason why in the last couple of years, UN Habitat with partners and local authorities all over the globe has been implementing new projects to collect disaggregated data at intra-city level. So far, we always collected data at national level, regional level, city level. Now we discover that we really, with this trend of cities that are becoming bigger and bigger, we need to be able to identify the difference between area of the city and in this way to address the issue. Now, if you, many of you hopefully have read the status of the cities report of 2 years ago, where UN Habitat proposed a new way to address and to study this issue at city level, with the City Prosperity Index. This index want to see not only the economical aspect like we are used to see the index for prosperity, but all the different aspects from social, economical, environment, to really be able to address at practical and policy level the issues. Now, we have a very rich and interesting agenda. I'm very looking forward to hear all our panelists, but I'm also looking forward to see many of you at Medellín this April for the World Urban Forum. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Francesca. It's great to hear about the success of the forums to date, and I'm hoping the Medellín Forum can be the biggest and most impactful one yet. And thank you all for being here with us in this room in the Gleacher Center today, and I also want to thank those who are joining via webcast, thanks to Next City and UN Habitat. This promises to be an interesting afternoon. On each of the 3 panels we have this afternoon, we have truly remarkable scholars, innovators, entrepreneurs, government officials, bringing together diverse experiences and perspectives. Because the topic of this event is an important one, the informed city, data-driven approaches to a more just, equitable, and sustainable city. Like many of you, and I see some former colleagues out there, I spent many years working in urban development. I worked with the Empowerment Zone in Harlem, Washington Heights, Upper Manhattan area, and with the city government in New Haven, Connecticut. And more recently, I spent several years addressing urban challenges around the world with the World Bank. And what strikes me as I reflect on years of observing and implementing urban policy is how poorly informed by rigorous analysis many policy interventions are. Conceptually, we know that policy should be data and evidence-driven, based on asking the right questions, gathering the right information, applying data to policy solutions, evaluating the impact of policies, revising them, and starting over again, asking the right questions. And yet we recognize how hard that can often be, whether it's because we lack the staff or the budgets to gather the data, maybe we lack the time and bandwidth to address anything unrelated to the crisis of the moment, or because we lack the political will to evaluate the outcome of policies we ourselves may have introduced and implemented, or any of a number of hurdles. Policymakers often make decisions and judgments that are not as well informed as they could be or even as they wish they would be by data and data-driven approaches. And even when a city, and a different city, has developed a solution, we often don't know about it or don't have sufficient evidence to justify importing it to our own cities. Every once in a while, of course, a policy innovation comes along that does get measured and evaluated and is shown to be successful. Sometimes this innovation is replicated in other cities and knowledge and learning is shared. I think of the success of Bolsa Familia, the conditional cash transfer program in Brazil, for example, which was extensively evaluated and then used as a model by other countries in Latin America and in other parts of the world. But all too often, we don't manage to share information. Fads are as influential as facts. Hopes are as persuasive as hard evidence. And in too many cases, I think urban policy remains uninformed. And that's why the World Urban Forum has so much potential and is so important, and why I think the role of universities like the University of Chicago can be so helpful. Cities across the world have many shared challenges, yet fewer shared solutions. And the World Urban Forum is an opportunity to share insights across regions and across cities to facilitate the flow of information and the sharing of best practices and models to encourage debate about ideas and experiences. And research universities are well positioned to help. We have an advantage over many policymakers because we enjoy freedom from the political process. We don't have to run for re-election on our record of reducing poverty. We don't have to try to defend our ideas to voters if they don't work. We have the luxury and the responsibility of honesty and objectivity. We also enjoy a healthy distance from the exigencies of crisis. We can take our time to study things and pursue the truth. We can emphasize what's important over what's merely urgent or interesting. We have the bandwidth to explore, as in the name of this event, data-driven approaches to a more just, equitable, and sustainable city. Now, this gives us a special role and opportunity, but also a special responsibility. To be successful and influential, universities must engage with the world. They shouldn't expect that policymakers can or will spend the time reading scholarly journals in disparate economic disciplines. Our scholars must be open to new ideas and new solutions. They should optimize theory with the practice and recognize the value of more porous boundaries between academic disciplines and the value of problem-oriented approaches. At the University of Chicago, we feel particularly well positioned to play an important role here because we have some of the best experts in the world, because our students and scholars cross boundaries and cross countries with their research, because we have scholars focusing on several of the shared global challenges confronting us, and a world with, as Francesca said, more than half its population living in cities, and cities expected to absorb 5 million new people each month. So you will get a taste of some of the university's diverse approaches today in discussions with the Urban Center for Computation and Data, the Game Changer Chicago Design Lab, the Chicago Crime Lab, the National Opinion Research Council, the work of Argonne National Laboratory, which is managed by the University of Chicago. And our goal is to have an impact, both here in Chicago and globally. One recent partnership that exemplifies the university's relationship with and within local communities is an arts incubator we opened in Washington Park after renovating a building that had been vacant for more than 20 years. The arts incubator is now home to exhibits and performances by Chicago artists, a woodworking shop for local high school students, and a multitude of regular programming for and shaped by local residents and the university community. Another local example, getting some national attention, is research conducted by the UChicago Crime Lab that showed that the Become a Man pilot in the Chicago public schools decreased violent crime arrests of participants by 44% and increased high school graduation rates. This helped inspire President Obama's recently launched My Brother's Keeper initiative. And globally, the Institute for Molecular Engineering at the University of Chicago has teamed up with Ben Gurion University in Israel to develop advanced purification methods to generate fresh water supply and assure safety and quality of that water supply. Members of our faculty are also partnering with the Public Health Foundation of India to understand how policy influences global health. Professor Anoop Milani from both the law school and the Pritzker School of Medicine has designed multi-year experiments to shed light on theories about the relationship between health and financial status. These are just a few examples, and today you'll hear about many others. And hopefully we'll also get a chance to hear from you about your experiences as we prepare to bring our very best thinking to the World Urban Forum in Medellín, Colombia next month. I am personally pleased, on behalf of the university's Global Engagement Office, working closely with our Civic Engagement Office, to reinforce these efforts by supporting our scholars and their work abroad, by expanding our global network and facilitating collaborations for our scholars with their peers around the world, by increasing opportunities for students to have access and exposure to global issues, and by helping to convene discussions such as this kickoff event today, where we will see how academic work and policy engagement contribute to informed policymaking. In today's program, we will explore the potential of computation, data, and mobile devices in an informed city, innovations around sustainable water in the 21st century city, opportunities to harness data for violence prevention. These are topics that matter greatly here in Chicago and in cities around the world. So again, on behalf of the University of Chicago, thank you for being part of this event. I'd now like to welcome two of our partners who will say a few words in succession after me. First is Antonio R. Riley, the Midwest Regional Administrator for the United States Department of Housing and Urban Development, which has done a tremendous job building support for the World Urban Forum and events like this convening today. And he'll be followed by Elena Harkness from the John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Foundation, a tremendous supporter of data-driven policy research and implementation. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, and thank you very much, Ian, for that introduction. Let me say that I want to welcome you to this event, which really does promises to be a stimulating dialogue on urban policy and how they support the creation of resilient and inclusive cities and regions. And I am Antonio Riley. I'm the HUD Midwest Regional Administrator for HUD Region 5. I oversee HUD's operations for the President and Secretary in 6 Midwestern states. But on behalf of the Department of Housing and Urban Development, I want to express my gratitude to our host, the University of Chicago Civic Engagement and Global Engagement, and to our sponsors, the MacArthur Foundation, which in partnership with Chicago's Sister Cities International and the Chicago Council on Global Affairs, UN Habitat, and HUD, which is making today's event possible. You know, it is always exciting to participate in these events that bring together seminal minds to examine the issues impacting urban regions and that can act as obstacles to greater resilience and livability. We know that people are increasingly moving back into urban areas, and Chicago is no different. And it is the smart cities that are devising new approaches and investing in new technologies that will thrive. The Chicago region has been fortunate to have visionary leadership that seeks out innovative approaches and implements these best practices locally. This is the third consecutive World Urban Forum for which HUD's Office of International and Philanthropic Innovation, or better known in our lingo at HUD as IPI, has co-hosted a pre-season session dialogue series. The IPI is dedicated to leveraging the best available evidence and innovations and lessons from the philanthropic and international partners, and is working with the State Department to coordinate U.S. engagement in the urban policy content of the World Forum number 7. Now, the purpose of these conversations really are twofold. One, to build interest among U.S. stakeholders and thought leaders around the World Urban Forum 7, which is being held in Colombia, and to provide on-the-ground insight into innovative U.S. urban policy that the U.S. delegation can use to better prepare for the gathering in Colombia. Now, HUD is committed to the work that happens as part of the World Urban Forum, which is the most prominent global convening dedicated to urban issues. This year's theme, Urban Equality and Development, is closely aligned with HUD's mission to create strong, livable, and inclusive communities. For HUD and our partners, the World Urban Forum is an opportunity to share and to learn what we want to tell our story about what is working here in the United States, and to identify where we need solutions and innovations from our global partners as well. Now, this forum is especially crucial because it will feature conversations about the future of the global urban agenda. For example, how does the international community work together after the United Nations Millennium Development expires in 2015? HUD is looking at the urban lens to play a critical role in that conversation. And for those of you in this audience who are considering attending the World Urban Forum 7 in Colombia, I encourage you to register by March 16th and to get signed up on the website and to get linked up to HUD's Office of International Philanthropic Innovations to receive updates as well. But in closing, I just want to mention the cross-collaborative efforts of partners and programs across multiple jurisdictions known as the Tri-State Alliance for Regional Development. This alliance targets 3 states here in the Midwest, Illinois, Indiana, and Wisconsin. There is a strong commitment to creating a sustainable vision for these tri-state region, one that will provide a built-in competitive edge when it comes to attracting private investments and retaining and creating jobs. We are identifying the synergies that exist between these communities and exploring the connectivity. We believe that a smarter, planning approach to solving decade-old problems opens up real possibilities for innovative, dynamic solutions to expanded employment and building economically competitive and environmentally sensitive communities across state lines and along the southern shores of Lake Michigan. Communities of opportunity that offer jobs, services, affordable housing free from discrimination, good schools and transportation choices that will come to characterize this multi-state region in our country's heartland within the global economy. I think that you all would agree with me that that is truly a picture of true economic resilience. So on behalf of all of us at HUD here in Region 5, let me welcome you to Chicago and say to you, please have a most enjoyable and informative gathering, because your work here today really does lays a platform for the kind of world that we want our children to inherit, and that work starts here and now. So thank you very much.
Okay, I do not want to be the thing standing in between a great captive audience and a stellar panel, so I'm going to be very brief. My name is Elena Harkness. I'm a program officer for community and economic development here in Chicago at the John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Foundation. When people want to know what that means and what I do, I generally tell them that it's my job to identify the people with the best ideas for making cities better places to live for their residents and to support those people. That's essentially what I do, and I'm very fortunate to have many of those people in the room today. Really excited to hear from all of you. Chicago is just one of the best places to do work on urban development. It has such an established track record for developing urban innovations. And in particular, I think we've done a great job working hard to ensure that we have ways for the city to work for every resident, not just for the affluent residents. So from Jane Addams and the Settlement House movement, to Saul Alinsky's community organizing, to today's work with the Local Initiative Support Corporation, doing comprehensive community economic development planning to make neighborhoods in Chicago great places for their residents. We're so fortunate to have a strong nonprofit, civil society sector, world-class research institutions like the University of Chicago in our backyard to bring the best and brightest minds to the study of urban problems and the crafting of solutions. And we also are fortunate to have tremendously committed public sector leadership here, committed to tackling the very hard, complex long-term problems in addition to some of the short-term ones. And I think that's a really important perspective for our leadership here to take. I'll say just a few words about philanthropy's role in this space and why MacArthur is proud to be a participant and a partner in this World Urban Forum planning. At MacArthur, our work spans the globe. It's very broad. We aim to improve social and environmental conditions for people in rural areas as well as urban ones. But the reality is that we live in an urbanizing world. And increasingly, working on global challenges, whether it's tackling income inequality or the pervasive effects of climate change, will mean working in cities. With our headquarters right here in Chicago, MacArthur has always taken an active interest in the health of this city. But in addition to supporting good work here in Chicago, one of the foundation's roles has always been to support the transmission of knowledge, information about what's working here and what might be working elsewhere, to make sure that our best practitioners and policymakers are learning from each other. We also aim in all of our work to create strong connections between researchers, policymakers, and practitioners. And we see the World Urban Forum this year in Medellín as an excellent platform for such an information exchange and a dialogue among leaders. So we're thrilled to be participating along with many of our other foundation colleagues across the country. We're particularly enthusiastic about Chicago's chosen pre-session dialogue topic, the informed city. Why is this so important to us? Information has always been one of the resources driving cities, underpinning their competitive advantage in the economy and creating such important social benefits for their residents. None of that is new, but the tools we now have to gather and analyze and make sense of this information generated by the city and about the city are more sophisticated and powerful than ever. And none of that is changing. It's only going to get better. So this new information is leading to new ways of understanding cities as the complex, interconnected systems that they are, and offering the potential to develop new solutions to these traditional and complex problems, everything from crime and public health to managing the water supply. At MacArthur, we're in the midst of an exploration of whether this new information, in the hands of leaders with the will and understanding to redesign systems and processes to take account of it, can support the evolution of key institutions like research universities that are critical to the functions of urban planning, management, and governance. We're learning from these early investments, from supporting the City of Chicago's innovative work to build an open data platform and an analytics system, to the University of Chicago's Urban Center for Computation and Data and the Crime Lab, you'll hear from on the next panel. All of the projects that we're supporting aim to generate new understanding about how cities work, the relationship between new forms of information and the evolution of these key institutions to support urban planning and development, and the most promising ways to connect the best research on cities with the policies and practices that influence real-world city planning and governance. And through it all, we're seeking to define new ways for philanthropy to play a role in supporting the creation of a more informed city. So like the other speakers before me, I'd love to thank our friends and our colleagues here at the University of Chicago for all that they did to pull this together, the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development for spearheading this series of pre-session dialogues and organizing the U.S. delegation's presence in Medellín at this coming World Urban Forum, Chicago Sister Cities International for helping us to explore connections to our partners in other Colombian cities, and the Chicago Council on Global Affairs, who has been a partner for us in this exploration for months now and continues to be an important learning partner. And finally, of course, UN Habitat, we thank you so much for giving us this opportunity to make the World Urban Forum a reality every couple of years for learning, and really look forward to more interaction with you. So I'll give you a quick preview. You all have agendas in front of you, and Ian already gave you a sense of where we're headed. But our first panel will introduce you to some of the new tools and computational techniques that researchers, in partnership with the University of Chicago and the city, are using to gather and analyze new data about ways that the city works on issues as wide-ranging as energy efficiency and public health. Then we'll take a short break, and we'll be back for sessions on using information to plan for our sustainable water supply and to develop new approaches to preventing crime and violence. It promises to be a stimulating and, in the spirit of this program, an informative afternoon, and we have much to learn from those who are dedicating themselves to this project of building healthier, more livable cities for all of their residents. I hope you'll enjoy it, and I thank you for coming.
Good afternoon. I'm Charlie Catlett. I'm the director of a relatively new center called the Urban Center for Computation and Data, which is a name that springs from it's a little bit of a riff off the term CCD that comes in your camera, in your digital camera. CCDs can see better than our eyes can see, faster over more spectrum. And so what this center is about is understanding cities in ways that might not be apparent to our senses. We put this panel together to talk about how computation, data, as the title says, mobile devices, technologies in general, play into understanding cities. And somebody tweeted that we were going to have this panel, and they said we're going to talk about using this to understand cities. What I wanted to respond actually to make them better, but I ran out of 140 characters, so I didn't tweet it. This panel and the Urban Center really come from a set of discussions that a number of us have had over the last few years with the goal of bringing people together from the arts, from design, architecture, science, from the social sciences, from the physical sciences, from engineering, to ask the question, when we look at cities, what could we accomplish as a team that we couldn't accomplish on our own? One of the things that motivated me to study cities, I spent half my time at Argonne National Laboratory, where we look at climate and environment, was to look at images like this, where you see on the left 1980 and on the right 2005. You can visually see from these satellite images the effect of urban growth, in this case here, in the Pearl River Delta. And that's looking back, looking forward. China is a really good example of where there's a need to understand cities, how they scale, how they work, because they're going to be building new cities at a rate that this planet has never seen before. So being able to predict the outcome of certain policies or designs or plans is essential as we move forward if we're going to capture all of the benefit that cities bring to us theoretically, and if we're going to address some of the side effects of cities that are not so much benefit to the people that live in them. Now, I don't believe that there are urban challenges that are simply social or simply engineering. And so this idea of bringing people together to look at how social sciences, physical science, and engineering, how design play together is really essential for us understanding how do cities like Chicago come to host vast areas where there are vacant properties. This isn't just an engineering issue, and it's certainly not just a social issue, but we need to understand what's happening by looking past and simulating looking forward, and that means looking at data, it means collecting data, it means doing analysis and computational modeling with that data. And to do that correctly means that we have to collaborate across disciplinary boundaries. Now, other cities are growing, and I think of favelas or slums, this is Sao Paulo, as the consequences of undirected urban growth. And so the question for us is, can we direct urban growth in such a way that these kind of disparities become the exception rather than the rule? And that's an open question. As we set up the Urban Center for Computation and Data, we wanted to look at urban challenges in 3 verticals. In the environment, you saw with the Landsat images in China, the effect on the environment of urban growth. Infrastructure, which means transportation, water, you'll hear about water this afternoon in another panel. And then people and society, economics. And to address these from a computational point of view, we sit between the social sciences and the physical sciences with computational tools that will allow us to do modeling over the course of dozens of years or decades to try to anticipate the impact of a planning or design decision. At a nearer term, a smaller scale in terms of time, understanding the data that's coming out of cities to make decisions that will affect the city over the next few months, weeks, maybe hours. And then embedded systems, sensing and other capabilities within the built environment to allow the city to adapt to real-time situations, whether it's traffic or events that happen such as flooding. We have 5, I'll say excellent speakers. They're all people that we've been working with and that have worked together that will address you this afternoon. And I carefully chose them from a lot of the scientists that we work with to give you a mix, a broad mix of what's happening in terms of applying computation and data and technology to the challenges of city of Chicago in a way that looks at the city as a test bed or a laboratory, but helps us learn about how these principles can be translated into other cities, into other cultures. Stacy Tessler, this, by the way, is the order that we'll go in. Stacy Lindau will talk, I won't give their titles because you can read them. Stacy's going to talk about some of the projects that span healthcare, but also engage citizens in collecting data that's relevant to them and to their healthcare. We enjoy rich data in Chicago about the operation of the city, the state of the city. Other cities don't have that sort of data coming from the top down. And if a city doesn't have the data infrastructure, how do you pull the data out of the city? Stace will talk about working with citizens to that end. Kate Cagney is really doing work that addresses the partnership that's necessary between the private sector, policymakers, and citizens in designing and guiding major changes to cities like the Chicago Lakeside development project so that they not only produce something within themselves of value to the city, but that they bring value to the surrounding communities. Brenna Berman, who's the CIO for the city of Chicago, will talk just sort of nuts and bolts about some of the things that the city has been able to do with data to do what we like to think of as proactive policy rather than just reactive. And then John Tolva, who was the CTO of the city until recently, will talk about, in general, the kind of role that government can play to not only use the data, but also to establish the necessary trust between the public and the private sector and citizens in order to make that data the most useful it can be. And then I left Melissa for last because she's doing what I think is some of the more fun things that people are doing at the university, and that's engaging the youth of the city in a way that tries to take advantage of the momentum, the technology, the enthusiasm behind the gaming technologies, and apply that to keeping kids engaged in school, helping to guide them toward healthier activities and choices. So this is our panel, and we're just going to go in order that I just said. I have, I did tell the panel that they could each go for 5 minutes, and after 7 minutes, I'm going to walk over and do a selfie with them. I wanted to do that with the whole panel, but the Oscars stole my idea. So we'll start with Stacy, and I think that this doesn't work. So you'll have to say next when you want another slide.
Okay. Hello, is that working? Yes, okay, good. Start the timer now. Good afternoon, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. I'll save all the niceties. No time for that. I do want to mention a disclaimer. The work I'm going to share with you is supported by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services. And while I'm very grateful for that support, nothing I say today should be construed as the opinion of that agency. Please don't hold them responsible for my ignorance. I'm going to talk about Community RX, which is a program that includes two components: MAPS Core, Meaningful, Active, Productive Science in Service to Community. It's a youth employment program. And Healthy RX, which is a technology that connects electronic medical record platforms in safety net clinics and emergency departments to the data that youth from MAPS Core collect. So I'm going to quickly tell you that story. But first, let me start with this image. So this is from the New Yorker, and it shows some cavemen authorities pushing a poor, unsuspecting caveman off a cliff. And what it says is it's the only treatment plan, it's the only treatment option his current health plan offers, or something. I don't know, Brenna's head is right. Brenna, can you read it?
Option he has under his current health
plan.
Thank
you. Very good. Nicely done. So I'm a physician taking care of patients on Chicago South Side. We have a terrific diversity of people on Chicago South Side, but many people, about half the population served by the University of Chicago Medicine, live at or below 200% of the federal poverty level. And this is a fact that most cities can relate to. Poverty, of course, is a reality of our cities. So in our cities, and I didn't say next, but we have a problem. Physicians are good at diagnosing disease, writing prescriptions for medications, and then we know the vast majority of what our patients need to get well, stay healthy, manage disease are not the diagnosis and not the medicine. It's everything else. It's fitness, it's exercise, it's fresh fruits and vegetables, it's social support, it's mental health, it's oral health. And it is a moral distress for those sad caveman doctors to say to a patient, you have diabetes and here's your prescription for insulin, and then goodbye, because we know we're throwing patients off the cliff. And this doesn't just happen in Chicago, but really in every city. So that crevasse is a crevasse of ignorance about the assets of our cities that this caveman patient could be making use of if we just knew where they were. What if our cities had, Amazon-type handle on the inventory of programs and services we have available in our city, even in the poorest communities, to connect this patient to the things he needs to do to manage with his diabetes? And guess what? What happens if we had that information and we were regularly referring patients to local businesses and organizations for the business of taking care of their health? We would also be supporting the local economy. So this is the idea of Community RX, and it started with MAPS Core 2009. We're employing youth. We've employed about 200 youth over the last 5 years whose job it is to map every single asset on every block of every street now of 75 square miles of the south side of Chicago and keep this information continuously updated. The youth know that the data they collect are connecting grandma, let's say, to the resources she needs in the community to be healthy. They're not just doing a menial task. They're generating data people can use and that are going to make their communities more vital. So we have MAPS Core going next, and this is the progress that our youth have made. 23 communities, 11 zip codes, 10,000 assets mapped, places serving the public. And these are every place. We didn't decide which place is healthy or not. Our partners with the Local Initiative Support Corporation and After School Matters told us everything is an asset until proven otherwise. So liquor stores are an asset. Maybe you can get a banana there. Maybe you can have a nice conversation, okay? This is the life cycle. So youth map all the businesses and organizations in the neighborhood. A cadre of people trained as community health information specialists call every one of those 10,000 places. They're now at about 3,000 and get detailed knowledge about the programs and services being offered. These data are shared publicly, and they are connected now to 3 electronic medical record platforms serving 16 different sites on the south side of Chicago as the demonstration, so patients get a prescription for the programs and services in their community they can use to be healthy, in addition to taking their medicine for diabetes, let's say. One last piece I want to share with you is that the data generated from this system are being fed back to the community-based service providers. So the YMCA can see how many people we've referred for what conditions from which zip codes, and they can also see where we needed to refer people but couldn't find any resources in the community. That becomes a business opportunity for the YMCA, or maybe for a small business owner who can do pest control, which is important for asthma management. That's what I mean by getting healthy is also good for the economy. And I just wanted to mention, since I know we're speaking to a global audience, sometimes the success of a program can depend or can be measured by its ability to scale. It turns out that Dublin, Ireland really resonated with the work that we were doing. And this is the one other place so far where MAPSCore has been replicated. A team from Dublin came to Chicago. They wanted to learn what we were doing, and I said, okay, you're going to have to come and map a community with us. They mapped Fuller Park, a community that was predominantly Irish, now predominantly African American, and they brought the program back to Dublin, Ireland, to a community called the Liberties, where the Guinness factory is, and where youth are helping to change the face of their community with asset mapping. Thank you very much.
I want to make sure you can hear me too. Can you hear me? Great. So because, right, our theme is global in nature, I wanted to start with a rendering of community design in Beijing done by Skidmore, Owings & Merrill. And as you can see, this is broad in scale and scope, large size, what would we think about an opportunity in Beijing. Charlie, next slide. But an opportunity like this rests in our own backyard. And these images that I'm sharing with you come from Chicago's Lakeside community. And Lakeside, I don't know how many of you are familiar with it. The Lakeshore Drive just opened up in October of 2013 and it now bisects the area of Lakeside. Lakeside is about 600 acres. It rests between roughly 76th and 92nd to the Calumet River. It's never been inhabited by people. It has been inhabited by U.S. Steel Southworks, which closed in the 90s. As you can see, this is the image in 1930. What it looks like today in 2013, so it's been completely razed. And this is what we might anticipate it could look like in 2030. One of the things that's most exciting about this project is to work with Skidmore, Owings & Merrill, to work with McCaffrey interests, and to think about the role of social science in a development like this one. Charlie, next slide. One of the reasons I want to share this image, I don't know, we are actually very close to Lakeshore East, which is right down here around the corner, and that's the red box that you're looking at now. We insert that in Chicago's lakeside space just to underscore the point that this is of a scale and scope that at least we have not been able to identify in the United States of any other project that's moving along currently. And also, this is overlays our loop. So that tells us, too, that this has the potential to become a second downtown, possibly to bring commercial and residential activity like we haven't seen in the South Side in decades. So potentially it could mean 30 to 45,000 jobs, 17,000 residential units, 50,000 people. So there's a potential for great activity here. So how do we measure such activity? What I wanted to do is talk a little bit about different sorts of methods that we're trying to introduce into the study of something like Lakeside. So we actually just finished a proposal yesterday, well, around 6 o'clock last night, with the Office of Civic Engagement to do a comparison of what's happening in Lakeside with what's happening in Washington Park. And through that project, we're thinking about things like a systematic social observation, focus groups, key informant interviews to try to draw out what people might like to see, both as Washington Park changes and also as as Lakeside evolves. And one of the things that has been, I think, exciting about this project as a social scientist is to speak with someone like Ed Woodbury, who is leading this project from the MacArthur side, and he says, oh, I'm a social scientist at heart. So he wants to use these data. He wants real-time data to think about where to place buildings, where we might think about walkways, and how to create, as Jane Jacobs might describe in The Death and Life of American Cities, eyes on the street and other ways of physical and social engagement to enrich the social glue of a community. So what I'm showing you here is but one way that we can think of informing the developer and the architect. And this is an activity space analysis. And what activity space means is just this notion that we're tracking where you go and what you do. And I'm not tracking any of you now, but if I were, I would track you on this. And I'd ping you about every 5 to 10 seconds. And then at 3 intervals in the day, I would ask you to fill out a short survey. This is actually based on some work from Chicksama High and Flo, who used to be an academic at the University of Chicago. But the notion is to ask you real time, instead of retrospective assessments like we might typically get in a social survey, to ask you in real time who you're with, what you're doing, and how you feel about it. I get that information, and then I can locate that with your physical space. And that informs, for me, whether or not we need to enrich that space, how you're brought together. And that's where this slide comes in. So this is a pilot project with some kids in Columbus, Ohio. This is a middle-income community and a low-income community. I want you to notice 2 things here. One is that networks are denser in the middle-income community than the low-income community, and potentially those networks are denser because the institutions are richer and bring people out and create social connection. So this idea of co-location, which a lot of network theorists are really interested in right now, might be driven by the role of social institutions. And so that's the kind of information we want to share with Skidmore and Zamero, we want to share with MacArthur, so that we can think about the placement of these institutions. And Charlie's reminding me that I'm almost done, but one of the things I want to quickly show you is that here's another pilot with older adults in the city of Chicago, some of the same sort of theory, that we can't just impose geographic space on people, we want to actually know where they go. And that's going to help us, again, share with the developers where we might place transportation or healthcare or a school. So Charlie, you can click on the last slide. And I hope you can see that. The little yellow boxes are people's census tracts. And the purple space is where people actually go. So this is just in closing to illustrate that we can't suppose, based on geographic boundaries imposed by government indices like the census, what's influential. What we really want to know is where people spend time. And this is the kind of social science research we hope can be informative as Lakeside moves forward. Thank you.
Hey, this is like speed round. So good afternoon. I'm Brenna Berman. I'm the CIO for the city, and I'm going to talk pretty quickly about 3 ways that we are using data in the city, some specific examples. So the first one is, this is a bit of an eye chart, don't worry if you can't see it. This is just a screenshot of the city's open data portal. And we've been publishing data rapidly over the last 3 years since the mayor came into office. And we do this for 3 reasons. And I bring this up just because this is the cornerstone of all of our data programs. And we do it, as I said, for 3 reasons. The first, transparency. The data doesn't belong to us, it belongs to the residents, and we want to make sure that they have it, because this is the best way for them to hold us, the city, accountable for what we do. We publish it to empower our civic development community. I have a pretty small team to support all of the technological needs of the city departments. I'm never going to be able to develop all of the apps that each community, ward, school, parent might want to build off of this data, but the civic development community can do that, and they use this data to do it, but they have to have it. So this is the idea of the city government as the platform. So the data is there for them, enabled by API to build whatever they would like. And then the third way that we use this, or that I hope that people use it, as data as economic development engine. There are several companies, some local, some not. There's one we know of in Texas. There's probably some out there I don't know of, that have used this data to power their companies. So driving jobs, driving revenue right here in the city of Chicago and outside, to power our economy, all driven by the data portal. This is the easiest way to see the power of data sort of firsthand in our community. So that's the portal, still growing, and perhaps the most exciting sort of innovation in this is the two-way aspect of our portal through our GitHub account, where people can submit corrections to our data sets. It's kind of a way of being somewhat vulnerable to your residents. We know our data is not perfect, and if you find a place where it's not, you can let us know. We have had corrections thus far. Next slide. Perhaps the most innovative thing that we're doing is the development of what we call our smart data platform. This is the construction of a spatial big data platform to enable all of our departments to do real-time predictive analytics. The city produces more than 1 million rows of spatial data a week, and we need to be able to use that. I couldn't buy something on the market today that did this. There is nothing available. If there was, I probably couldn't afford it. So we are building this. It is the first open source smart data platform, at least that we're aware of. I don't profess to know everything. We're committed to the open source approach so that any other organization could just have this, because every city is trying to solve some of the same problems that we are, so we want this to be available to them as well. Perhaps the most exciting thing about this for me is not just some of the technical challenges that we're trying to solve, but the fact that we're coming at this problem from what I consider to be a user perspective. My department has 2, soon to be 3 data engineers, which is actually very, very exciting. There's actually very few cities in the country that even have 1 data engineer, so I'm quite lucky. Still, they are a bottleneck for the city of Chicago in the amount of predictive analytics we plan to do across the city. This platform, when it's built, which is going to take 2 to 3 years, will put the power of predictive analytics into the hands of department analysts and kind of get the data engineer out of the way. That's quite exciting because, to Charlie's point earlier on, this is what takes predictive analytics and decision-making from hours to minutes, sometimes from weeks and months down to days or even faster for our departments. So that things used to be firefighting all the time is going to free the leadership and management of our city departments up to focus on more data-driven decision-making and improving the lives of our residents on a regular basis. So this is going to put the data into their hands. One quick example of how we're using this, the first pilot, quick next slide, and I'll be fast about this. You might have seen this in some of the papers. I do kind of hate that the first pilot was about rodents, but we live on the water, we have rats, you may have seen one occasionally. The city has always done sort of proactive rat baiting, but it was always driven by 311 calls, right? A resident sees a rat in their backyard or their driveway, they probably squeal, at least that's what I would do, and then they call 311. The team that does the rat baiting is given a list of addresses every morning, and they go out and they bait up and down the street of the address where the call came in for. That means that they were only baiting where there was a history of rat problems or where they received a call. That limited the reach of that team. We were able to derive a model based on 31 types of calls that were correlated to predict the occurrence of a rat infestation. Some of them were unrelated to anything you might think predicted a rat infestation. This now means that this team goes out predictively without someone having to call in the sighting of a rat, and the pilot is about a week to the end of its stretch, and early results are that likely by the end of the summer, we will be heading out to address rat problems prior to anyone in the city actually seeing one. So this is a way for this team to extend their reach and actually do more with the same amount of resources that they have today. So it's a small example, but you can actually see where this exact same model can extend to what you might consider sort of much more important resources in the city. Not that rats aren't a big problem, but we're much more concerned about limited resources such as vaccines, et cetera, but the same model would apply. And then one last example of one of the ways that we are trying to make our data more available to partners that can actually help us think about hard problems, such as researchers, many of whom are in the room, In partnership with Chapin Hall at the University of Chicago, we set out, and supported by MacArthur, to build a data dictionary. Many of you probably know what that is, a catalog of all the data in the city. We support more than 200 applications, and on any given day, I don't actually know exactly where all of my data is, and neither do the many researchers that call and say, I'm trying to understand this problem in the city. What data do you have that can help me? Quite hard to find. This data dictionary is going to help us answer that. So it helps me internally as we bring our application portfolio into better management, cost savings, et cetera, but will also help us partner better with researchers trying to help us answer some of these intractable urban problems, because this is a catalog of all of the data we have, where to find it, what kind of maintenance plan it's on, and who owns it from a business perspective, so who's the expert in that area. And perhaps most interesting about this, more generally, when you get to that question of cities sharing between themselves and getting bigger global value out of the work that we're doing, is the application that we built to manage and support the data dictionary was the first piece of open source software that we built and completed. So any city can do this based on the software that we built. And we know of 4 cities that have already picked this up and started using it, as well as 2 major nonprofits that are doing the same thing now. So it's a small contribution to sort of the broader problems that we're all trying to address. So a couple of real world examples.
Man, you were this close to getting a selfie.
Charlie, let's go. Can everybody hear me? Let's go to the last. Actually, just stay on that. Just stay on that one, if you would. One of the beauties of going later in the panel is that all the good points and awesome examples have already been given, especially given that Brenna and I worked very closely together. So I may just wing it here with 3 separate stories. And let me start my timer. Okay. I'm working with the Chicago Architecture Foundation. You may know them from the boat tour. They have an exhibit being planned for the atrium there to open in May called Chicago, the City of Big Data, where they're going to actually be showing the infrastructure of data, the outcomes, the generators, the architecture, if you will, of a data-informed city using a variety of interesting visualization techniques, and I encourage you to go see it. But one of the questions we asked ourselves is, okay, so in 2014, what makes Chicago a data-informed city that didn't make it so 10 years ago or 5 years ago? And what we realized is actually cities have always been information, we didn't really call it data, but have always been information-driven. It's one of the reasons people move to cities. Opportunity comes from a dense communication and information network. You had clock towers, right, that were the piece of data that stitched everyone together. You had town criers that were kind of the internet nodes of the 19th century city, newspapers, obviously. And one of the interesting things that Brenna and I realized when we were doing things digging up our streets is that some of the oldest infrastructure in the streets, or the lowest infrastructure, below the freight tunnels, below the water pipes and the sewer mains, were telegraph lines. Which, if you think about it, that means we were more interested in communicating with each other than we were in hygiene when we built the city. Communication and information technology has always characterized cities. So what makes it different now? The difference is the pace and volume of a city's ability to have eyes on the street, as Kate said. But it's not just one pair of eyes, it's everybody's eyes. Sort of the number of feedback loops have increased. So second story, very quickly. Last week I was in the country of Kazakhstan, which is in Central Asia. It borders China and Russia and the other stands below it. You may have heard of them because they are the owners of half of one of the world's worst environmental disasters, called the Aral Sea. It was the 4th largest inland sea prior to it being depleted starting in the 50s via diversion of it for irrigation by the Soviets. It's now 10% the size that it was. Kazakhstan is a country that is ashamed of that and hyper-aware as they, too, enjoy the fruits and the challenges of urbanization. So my company, Positive Energy Practice, was asked to come in and help them redesign their capital city to generate more power than it consumes. You know, that is this ghost of the Aral Sea and the environmental degradation that kind of haunts urban planning over there. And the Minister of the Environment asked me, he said, John, what is a smart city? He said, is it a smart grid? Because we're planning one of those. And I said, well, actually, it's more eyes on the street. It is empowering your residents and your businesses with technology to make the city easier to manage, to make it easier to use. And that is a combination of hardware and software. But he said, okay, so what software package should I buy? You know, what vendor should I engage? I said, that really is not the point here. And one of the things that I hope the World Urban Forum addresses is now every urban policymaker on earth has heard of smart cities, thanks to Cisco and IBM and Siemens and those. We need to be sure that that's being translated as starting with people first. What are the problems that you're trying to solve? And then what are the sensor networks and the analytics packages and the information technology, the networking that then enables that? It was curious to me that smart city now means what software should I install? Because cities have always, to some degree, been data-driven and smart. We just need to figure out which of those pieces to accelerate. Lastly, I actually worked for one of those big companies that sell software packages. Prior to joining the city, I was with IBM for 13 years. And they invited me back after I left the city of Chicago and Mayor Emanuel's administration in November to ask me what I thought from the other side. And I said, well, I think you missed the boat. I think, and I love IBM. They did great things for me. But I said, your vision and the other sort of hardware and software makers is that a smart city is the sum of its instrumented infrastructure. If we just got enough sensors out on the bridges and on the light poles and things like that, then we would finally be able to manage this more efficiently. And I think the opportunity now, as we're at sort of a second wave of smart cities, which you don't see as a title up there, and I thank you for that. And you don't even see data-driven. It's just informed. I think that shows a maturation of what we understand a smart city to be, is that that's all well and good, instrumented infrastructure, but actually you need to start with the policy outcomes. And I think it's time to kind of take back that narrative or supplement that narrative to what the IT companies have established in the popular imagination. I'll stop there.
Everyone's setting their timers. You don't want your picture with me.
I don't trust you. You said you'd yank us off the stage. Let's go full circle and back to talking about young people. So at the University of Chicago, I wear many hats. I'm a physician and a researcher, but I'm also the Dean for Diversity. And so as such, I have to think about young people and do we have an adequate pipeline or pathway for jobs in science and health? So when we look at the city of Chicago, and especially those of us who live on the South Side, one thing that's very remarkable is how segregated it is. And if you talk to people like Paul Farmer, a researcher at Harvard, he talks not about this segregation as being neutral, but he talks about the structures and the way in which people live and the way that people live separately, and that's violent. And that term structural violence is a way of starting to think about the different ways in which people live in cities. So many of us live in that part, or at least are visiting this upper part of Chicago, but other people have lived in a Chicago that looks like this. And when you're in a clinical setting, you think, well, what I do in that setting, I'm going to give you, as Dr. Lindau said, I'll give you this prescription and things will be better. But when you return to this environment, the answer is that they're not. And so his idea is that this is a way of, that it is a violence. It's not a neutral difference. And as a result, there are lifelong outcomes and changes in your lifelong opportunities. I'll go to the next one. And so that's how I got interested in this idea, because a number of the disparities that we see in health outcomes have to do with that segregation. So in 2012, with my colleague Patrick Jagoda, I started what was called the Game Changer Design Lab. And the idea is, can we begin to tap the power of games to begin to transform the lives of urban youth? Maybe it's just a way of getting adhering ourselves to a much more well-funded and vigorous and vibrant industry, which is the game industry. But the question is, can the act of participating in game design, and so we have young people who come and design games with us, or can the act of playing a game create a transformative experience for young people? So there are a number of things that young people need to know as they get older. and one is 21st century skills. It's not just enough to sit in a classroom and have knowledge, right? We all know what to eat. That doesn't mean that we actually do it, right? We know lots of things, but to actually change behavior, you need skills and intention and drive and resilience and leadership. Where do young people get that? Can we also start to think about all of the external and internal assets that young people need to have? Can they become people who are engaged in their community? If we create these great cities, are these young people going to be excited about it and be civically engaged? And so these are the types of understandings that we're trying to figure out. Can we do this through games? And the last thing is, when we look at health risk behaviors, one of the most powerful things is having a plan for the future. Right? And so we know this. We know that kids who are excited about who they're going to be in the world, they avoid so many risk behaviors, right? But how do you find that and how do you tap into it? So next slide. Okay. So I'm going to tell you the tools that we use. The first is we use a lot of narrative. And the idea is that when individuals tell stories, it's an incredibly powerful experience. But often these are young people where no one said that their personal story is important. Often they're kind of laughed at or teased for telling something that's really personal. So we use a lot of narratives, and we use narratives as the beginning of games. The second thing we do is something called alternate reality games. And this poster, this was actually funded by the MacArthur Foundation through their digital media and learning program. This poster is from a summer project that we do on the campus of the University of Chicago. And this is Aria, who was the lead character. And we create a really thick, interesting narrative that unfolds over the course of 3 to 5 weeks during the summer. And what's important is that you can use stories to start to transform a space. You can start to tell a totally different story about a place. And through that process, an urban area becomes magical. And what we did was we had young people who are suddenly willing to take all sorts of challenges, right? Because the point of games is to try and to fail. And if you fail, you get to try again. These are young people where risk and mistakes can have really dire, sometimes lethal consequences. And so through games, we're creating a safe space for young people to fail. They come to the campus and they try and they do math problems and they sit in classrooms, they listen to professors and they're listening and they're trying to figure out the next clue to the puzzle they're trying to solve. But for us, they're sitting in a college classroom. Suddenly this place that looks very austere, if you're in the south side of Chicago, you see nothing and suddenly it's like these, it looks like Disneyland with these turrets and things rising in the distance. And suddenly we give young people ownership over that college campus. We're also exploring something called digital badges, and this is something that's rolling out across the country, but we're also very interested in studying it. An idea, think about almost like a Girl Scout or a Boy Scout badge where you break something down into actual components. What are the things, the skills, the core competencies I need to get where I'm going? And what if we can start to create pathways that young people can scaffold their skills towards an achievement? And then finally, we create board games and video games to start to help young people understand systems. So right now we're designing a game about cigarette use. And you play the role as a tobacco company, and you want to get as many people addicted as you possibly can, and you can choose your media strategy. But for young people, they can start to see how there's actually a larger system behind as they make decisions about, do I smoke or not smoke? So those are the games, and we hopefully will have 200 kids again on the University of Chicago campus. And the last thing I'll tell you is that we seem to be reaching a very different group of young people. So the group that was there this summer was 88% African American, but the majority were African American male high school students. So this group that we're often saying, oh, we can't reach them, or what are we going to do about this? Spent the entire summer with us, incredibly engaged, incredibly talented. So, thank you.
I'm going to let the audience ask a question if they have one, but maybe I'll start out. I got a call Monday from someone in Los Angeles who wanted to start a data science meetup where people come together and access the city's data that the city is publishing, et cetera. So there was a conversation where somebody found out how to contact someone in Chicago and said, how do we replicate what you're doing in Chicago in our city? So each of you are doing different things in the city of Chicago, all of which are needed and applicable to other places in the world. So imagine that you got a call from Sao Paulo or Singapore or Madrid, and they asked you, can you come here and, assume you could do this, you come here and spend a year helping us replicate what you've done in Chicago. What would be the thing that you would first come to mind that you would do? I'll let whoever wants to answer that.
What's everybody looking at me for?
You were there the first day.
Yeah, that's true. And actually, cities did come to, or
Yeah.
probably still do, come to the administration and ask, and very small cities too, suburbs even. I mean, the one thing that I'll say is data is such a resource for bottom-up development, for crowdsourcing and for watching wonderful things happen at the periphery of government. But it makes a huge difference when the political will is there, the executive political will is there to support that. In fact, it might make all the difference, and we had that and have that in Mayor Emanuel. So the first question I ask is are you putting together a package to pitch the mayor, or did he or she ask you to do this? You know, that's a huge part of it, and it's a totally different discussion if they're saying, how do I convince, for instance, the Village of Oak Park, one of the I guess council members or representatives of Oak Park asked me and said, the mayor or the city manager is really not bought into this. That's a different conversation, and what I said there is, well, pick a pain point, one that's got a lot of popular support for solving, and see what you can do from the ground up. Maybe it's crowdsourced data collection about the pain of parking, something like that. Easy, low-hanging fruit in a big city is public transportation. Oftentimes, smaller cities don't have that. But pick something, solve it, create an app or create a visualization that is just viscerally moving to the chief executive or whomever and start there. So that's usually how my conversation started.
I know in the case of LA, the mayor is behind it, and because we've all gotten that phone call. I think just starting to get the data out there. We had a poster floating around the office almost 3 years ago to unleash all the data. Is that what it said?
Yeah.
To unleash all the data, because and that was behind our idea of government being the platform, because we'll never have all of the resources to be everything, nor do we have all the ideas, right? So rather than the 100 of us that my department has trying to do everything, let's leverage the 3 million of people in Chicago and beyond, an even bigger number, to come up with all the great ideas. So if we get the data out there, we have 3 million people as opposed to the 100 in my department. So that was our first step, and I get tons of calls still from people as small as Oak Park and people as big as countries all over the world asking about open data programs, and they do actually want to know, because most importantly is if you're going to put the data out there, how do you get engaged with the civic development community to encourage that partnership so the data doesn't just sort of sit there. A lot of that here was done very very organically, and did, I think, build from Chicago's tradition. I think one of the opening speakers mentioned Saul Alinsky, built from that tradition of people just sort of on the street engaging with different communities, and people like John going to the meetups, et cetera. And some of that's just sort of brute force effort of being out and talking, and the government being open from the mayor down to department leadership, et cetera, being willing to sort of let go of that control and letting community members help come up with the answers. And we still do a lot of that work today.
May I just add one piece to that? One of the things I think is important to think about in this context of data and big data are that I think it's important to bring together lots of different ways of collecting these data. One of the things we're most concerned about in the Lakeside Project is making sure that we collect information from the residents who live around that development. And we want to be systematic about it such that residents who may be socially or physically isolated, may not have the ear of the alderman, may not go to community meetings. we want to make certain that those voices are heard as well. And so one way we're able to do that is through a form of social survey, through the form of activity-based data collection like I described earlier. But I think we need to think about many ways to triangulate these methods so that we're making certain that the data we're observing aren't select.
So this has been an interesting question for us. We are starting to do some pilot work in India, and what's been interesting is to see, one, different access levels to technology, but also in some places the use of technology is very gendered. So we thought, oh, we'll use cell phones. We'll create games on cell phones, and that'll be a great way to have young people connect, and they can also connect to young people in the United States, only to find that girls and cell phones is actually considered pretty taboo. They can talk to their brother who's holding the cell phone, but they can't hold it on their own. So for us, there's really a very slow process of understanding, because this is so connected to education and youth empowerment, it's actually a very slow process working our way into finding what's the most appropriate approach as we start to move outside of Chicago and the U.S.
In the category of alternate forms, though, Detroit, which had no open data, still has no open data policy or collection. We were shocked to learn, a little group of city folk went there to help them and learned that there's a robust open data community in Detroit. It just has nothing to do with city government. Basically, the data had to be collected. The impatient actors in open data, like Dr. Lindau, who needed it, did it. And they're now exploring with the idea of the open data portal for Detroit being hosted not by the government, right? That the government then is the one that uses it and makes policy from it, but that they're not so there are other models for doing this. The void seems to be filled where need exists.
Since you mentioned Detroit, my hometown.
Oh.
So I'm holding the New York Times, February 17th, 2014, a picture of Detroit ruined street by forlorn street. Did anyone see this article? So it's mapping blight. Oh, it kills me. They're sending out teams, and this is coming from the private sector, of people whose job it is to map the crevasse of badness that has happened to Detroit. And I guess I would add to John's comments about how to sort of counsel the group that says, can you bring it here? The first step is an asset-based view. We know that poorer parts of our urban areas around the world are suffering, obviously, with poverty and unemployment and undereducation. And we know those realities, and we can't deny them. But if somebody had been tracking the assets of Detroit for the last 20 years, and we could have seen over time some hot spots where things were going in the wrong direction, maybe we wouldn't be celebrating what they call blexting, a new term to describe the act of mapping blight. I feel so strongly about this. Right? So my first advice would be if someone called me up and said, what do we do? Take an asset-based view. Wherever you are, you have assets that people can use to lift themselves up. And if you don't have a full inventory of your assets, and our great city does not, and probably most cities in the world do not, have a corporate-level understanding, corporate-level inventory of all of the assets of our city. And we should. And that's what I would do.
All right, thank you. So we're going to move on to the next panel. I'm sorry there's not time to take questions from you, but I think most people are sticking around. So I'd like to thank this awesome panel.